She had chased away 7 tenants in 3 years, and everyone in the village knew exactly why. Not because they were troublemakers. Not because they refused to pay rent. But because they were beautiful, and Mama Chidinma could not stand the thought of a beautiful woman living under her roof while her husband, Papa Chidinma, still had eyes in his head. The village of Umueze sat quietly between 2 hills in the eastern heartland, the kind of place where everyone knew your name, your business, and the names of your grandparents. It was a village of red earth roads, mango trees that leaned over compound walls, and evenings filled with the smell of palm oil soup drifting through open windows. Life moved slowly there, but gossip moved fast. And the story of Mama Chidinma and her beautiful tenants had become the most talked about tale in the entire community. Mama Chidinma was not always this way. As a young woman, she had been known for her warmth, her loud laughter, and the generous portions she served at her food stall near the market. She had married Papa Chidinma, a quiet, gentle man who worked as a carpenter, and together they had built a modest compound with a small boys' quarters they rented out to help with household expenses. For years, their tenants were elderly traders, young male students, and middle-aged civil servants who caused no drama. Then one harmless afternoon, everything changed. A young woman named Adiz had moved in to take the room. She was fresh out of secondary school, waiting for her university admission, and carried herself with the natural grace of someone who did not yet know the power of her own presence. Papa Chidinma had helped her carry her box from the taxi. He smiled at her. He offered her water. He even repaired the broken hinge on her door without being asked. Mama Chidinma watched all of this from her kitchen window, and something dark and heavy settled into her chest that day and never quite left. Adiz eventually got her admission and moved out peacefully, but Mama Chidinma had already made a silent oath. No more beautiful tenants. She did not announce this policy publicly, of course. She simply found reasons. One prospective tenant was told the room had a plumbing problem that did not exist. Another was told the rent had doubled overnight. A third was welcomed in, then subjected to so many petty inconveniences, including switched-off water supply, late maintenance, and cold hostility at every turn, that she packed her bags within a month. The village talked. The village always talked. But Mama Chidinma held her head high and said she simply had high standards for her property. By the time the 8th tenant arrived, Mama Chidinma had refined her methods. She knew how to spot beauty at the gate and manufacture a reason before the woman even sat down. But this time, something was different. This time, the woman at the gate was not young. She was perhaps 50, with silver threading through her natural hair, a face that carried the kind of beauty that only deepens with time, and eyes that looked directly at you as though they already knew your secrets. Her name was Mrs. Obiajili, and she had recently retired from teaching and was relocating to Umueze to be closer to her aging mother. Mama Chidinma almost turned her away at the gate. Almost. But Mrs. Obiajili had arrived with a full year's rent in cash, a letter of recommendation from the local church pastor, and 2 grandchildren toddling behind her who immediately ran to hug Mama Chidinma's knees the moment they saw her. Something about the moment disarmed her. She showed Mrs. Obiajili the room. She took the money. She told herself this one was different, an older woman, a grandmother, clearly not a threat. She would allow it just this once. What Mama Chidinma did not know was that Mrs. Obiajili was not just a retired teacher. She was a woman who had spent 30 years watching children, reading the invisible writing on people's faces, and understanding the true causes behind unkind behavior. She noticed the coolness in Mama Chidinma's welcome. She noticed the way Mama Chidinma watched the window every time Papa Chidinma passed through the compound. She noticed the photographs in the corridor of the 7 previous tenants that had been removed and replaced with a painting of a landscape. She did not say anything. She simply went about her days with a quiet steadiness that slowly, almost invisibly, began to change the atmosphere of the compound. She cooked extra food and left portions outside her door. She sat with Mama Chidinma in the evenings when Papa Chidinma went to his workshop. She listened more than she spoke. She asked Mama Chidinma about her childhood, her mother, her first days in the village as a young wife. And Mama Chidinma, who had not been listened to in years, found herself talking more than she had in a long time. She talked about her mother's compound, about her own insecurities as a young bride in a village full of beautiful women, about the nights she had lain awake wondering if she was enough. She had not meant to say so much. It simply came out, the way buried things eventually come out when they are finally given warmth and space. One evening, about 3 months into the tenancy, Papa Chidinma came home with a small wooden box he had carved. Inside was a note and a simple bead necklace. The note said that after 30 years, he still chose her every day, and he had simply never found the right way to say it. He had asked Mrs. Obiagili to help him present it properly, having confided in her during one of her visits to his workshop that he worried his wife had been carrying something heavy for years. Mrs. Obiagili had quietly encouraged him, told him that the words he was looking for were not complicated, that love spoken plainly is the most powerful kind. Mama Chidinma held the box for a long time without speaking. Then she sat down on the veranda steps, and for the first time in many years, she wept without shame. Not the quiet, controlled tears of a proud woman, but the full, releasing kind that comes when a person finally puts down a weight they have been carrying for so long that they forgot it was not supposed to be permanent. Papa Chidinma sat beside her. Mrs. Obiagili went quietly inside and made tea. In the weeks that followed, Mama Chidinma began to change in ways the village could not help but notice. She greeted people more warmly at the market. She stopped casting sharp glances at the young women who bought fabric near her store. She even personally apologized to one of her former tenants, a woman named Ngozi who had been driven out in the second year, and who received the apology with more grace than Mama Chidinma felt she deserved. The village did not fully understand what had happened inside that compound. They only knew that the woman who had once been famous for her suspicion and coldness had become someone who laughed more, judged less, and kept a very dignified retired teacher as her closest friend. The story spread the way good stories do in small communities, not all at once, but in fragments, in whispers at the well, in asides during Sunday service, in the long afternoon conversations between women shelling beans on their verandas. What Mama Chidinma had discovered was not a simple lesson about jealousy, though jealousy had certainly been the door through which her troubles entered. What she discovered was that fear dressed in pride is one of the most exhausting costumes a person can wear. She had spent years protecting herself from a threat that lived entirely in her own imagination, building walls that kept out not just rivals but also warmth, friendship, and the very intimacy with her husband that she feared losing. The armor had become the wound. And Mrs. Obiagili, who had come only seeking a quiet room near her aging mother, had given her none of this directly. She had simply been present, consistent, and kind, in the way that only someone who has truly lived and truly made peace with themselves can be. She had not lectured. She had not judged. She had merely made space for Mama Chidinma to hear herself clearly, perhaps for the very first time. In Umueze, they say that the greatest teachers do not always come in the form of elders with long staffs and ancient proverbs. Sometimes they come as quiet strangers with a full year's rent, silver in their hair, and the patient wisdom to know that the most broken people are not the ones who need correction. They are the ones who need to feel, just once, that they are truly seen. Mama Chidinma had finally been seen. And in being seen, she learned to see others. That, the village agreed, was the real miracle of the compound on the Red Earth Road, and the story was worth telling for a long time to come.